So one of the things we want to do first is kind of bring out the whole thing. So when we talk about thriving in the circuit breaker, which I love that name, by the way, we just have quarantine and I don't know, we have a million names over here and they all seem just wrong to me. But circuit breaker sounds like a great idea. And a circuit breaker, not only for contagion, but it's been a circuit breaker, I think, for all of us, hopefully positive. I know some negative, but it's just that, wait, we've got to reset. We've got to reset how we do things for our health, but also I think it's provided opportunities and challenges to work in all the ways that we do. And so before I assumed what your challenges were as a family or as a father, I wanted to kind of bring in some foundational pieces. And what we've got here is kind of the 4 areas of a man, right? Of your role right now as a circuit breaker. So I am in groups that are just about men's ministry. I'm in groups that are actually, I'm in one group that is specifically for men that own their own business, that are married, that have children. And it's actually called the trifecta of insanity, of trying to manage all those things, trying to run a business, trying to keep your family not just intact, but strong, and then trying to keep your marriage intact with all that together. And so it really, I was attracted to it because when they said trifecta of insanity, I'm like, they get it. And so it's a group called Warrior that I'm very proud to be a part of. But worker, husband, father, and man. Now I'm going to kind of cover this real quick. And after each one of these sections, we'll have Q&A. We're not going to do Q&A after this first little section because we could talk all day about the nuances of all these areas. We could sit and philosophize about all the things that are going on that let us know, that, well, I think it's more this area, more that area. We're going to try to stay out of those weeds. And so the first thing we are is a man. If we're talking about fathers, believe it or not, even though this is a discussion in my country, if you're a father, you're a man. If you're a man, you're not a mom. There are certain roles that we have. Some do well, some don't do well. But this is, my dad taught biology in high school for 17 years. This is what I know. A father is a man, and only a man can be a father, okay, in that role biologically and otherwise. And that seems to be a challenge sometimes because we don't want to hurt people's feelings. But what we're talking about tonight is men who are all these things, right? And so as a man, I've got different things that go on with me that are much different than my wife deals with. If I had a daughter, what she would deal with. Being a man is its own privilege many times, but also its own set of challenges. As a man, I know that I'm a worker as well. Not only am I supposed to provide for my family, but before I had a family, I was trained and brought up to be a worker. And we'll talk about those things. I fell in love with a beautiful girl in college, and therefore she allowed me, after changing a lot of behavior, and I'm still working on it, to become a husband. Some of you may not be fathers yet, but that may be about to happen. But those of you that are fathers know that your role as a husband is very important. And I love that video, but it's still very different. It's different than being a worker. It's different than just being a man. It's different than being a father. You can be a husband, you can be a great husband, but if you're not a father yet, then you don't know some of the challenges. Also, if you're just trying to be a father and not a husband, that's a different set of challenges, right? And so we know how that works. And then the last one, which we will spend a good bit of time on, is talking about how all of these things wrap itself into being a father, because that's going to be part of the challenge that we're talking about. So in the chat, as we continue to go, think about those 4 areas. Where are you feeling the most challenge in this area? If you're not feeling challenges in all 4 of them, you're not paying attention. But which one is the one that seems to be the heaviest, or the one that you have to wrestle with the most, or the one that keeps popping up, or the most challenging, perhaps? And so think about these 4 areas and think about, this is where I'm finding my biggest challenge. We're making an assumption that being a father within this whole time is its own set of challenges, but I don't think we can ignore all the other areas that get wrapped into that. We just can't say, hey, be a dad like this because, just be a dad. Well, I'm not just a dad. I'm a father and a husband, and I have a job, or I have work. I may own my own business, or I may be in ministry, or what's my vocation and my avocation. And those things can be very different. And so we're going to talk about these 4 areas. So when we talk about being a man, this has been a big challenge in our culture, I think really around the world. It's a big discussion here in the US, and people want to redefine it for the negatives that sometimes come up from people who are men. Right? We have this concept of toxic masculinity. Masculinity is not toxic. People who are masculines can sometimes be toxic, but the nature of being a man, there's nothing wrong with it. How you behave as a man, things you do as a man, choices you make, that may be toxic, but so many times we just say, you know, dudes are toxic, men are toxic. That's not constructive and it's not true. And so when we look at being a man, we're going to start with power. And power has such a negative connotation because we always feel like we have to take it from someone else. And that's why I wanted to start with this as well. We as men, husbands, and fathers, regardless of whether it's a faith background you come from or a secular background, social science and faith and wisdom have said that men must stand and sit or abide in their power. Because what that power does is provide a stability to all those around them, right? We have great women soldiers. We have great women warriors. My mom, my wife, my grandmothers all have amazing power. But my power as a man comes from the things I do for those that surround me, my culture, my climate, my society, my city, my family. Anybody that comes in contact with me, I've got to gain and retain the power that I have as a man, the power to do right. You talked about character development earlier, the character that I portray. And so what I've got to do as a man is make sure that nothing in popular culture, nothing in society, nothing, even within my own family, takes away my power. And that's a struggle, right? Because we're trying to, in our power, trying to help so many people. And sometimes we lose it. We lose our power because we're trying to do what everybody else wants us to do instead of what we know or we're wired or are called to do. And so we want to stick with power, not to take, just because you have power doesn't reduce the power that somebody else has. The power that you bring to the table, the power that you bring into your manhood, into your family, into your marriage, into your work is an amazing thing that people need from you. And they don't need you to shirk or fall down from that power. It can be abused, but that's really not power. That's a weakness in people. Power is when you stand straight, we had a huge storm here last night. I've got trees that didn't take away anything from anybody, but because of the power they have in their roots, they stood strong, didn't fall on anybody else, sheltered other things. So that's kind of what we are as men. Also, we as men know we have to have a purpose. The men that I meet that struggle the most don't know what direction to go in. They don't know where to go, and they're being told a lot of different things. And so we as men, nobody else gets to determine my purpose, but I know I need it. Men that falter, men that struggle the most with addiction, men that struggle the most with some challenges in the relationship don't have a purpose, right? Or they haven't honed in on it, or they don't realize that the purpose that they have been told they have doesn't suit their power, doesn't suit their heart. And then that also is our place. Like my two sons are 24 and 28, and they are men. They are grown men. They are young grown men, and they have a place in this world on this planet, and we've raised them to go to that place. But our challenge has been as they have become men in college, started living on their own, and then they come back to my place. They come back to their home. And we've had to have some pretty heated discussions. And I had the same with my father, so I understand this. This is, when they come here, this is their home, right? Their mother and father are here. We welcome them. We want to bless them. But this is not your house. And so just because you're a grown man, right? And just because you're making your own decisions in this place, I make the decisions when my wife approves of them, right? But this is my place and this is my home. When they come here, I have to establish this as a place for my sons. I have to establish this as a safe place for my wife with sons that don't always know how to react to that. But we as men in our work, we as men in our homes, in our families, in our extended families have to have a place. They're finding their place within their friends and then also their place with all these other things. And so I see this going on with my sons as well. So as we look at our place as a man, what are the things that are being challenged right now? Where are you gaining or losing power? Where are you finding your purpose or maintaining your purpose? We know that many of you on here are having to work differently, but some of you have lost work, and that changes how you feel about your purpose. Where you used to go to work and used to go to a building or used to go and be on teams, and now you're kind of in a room, right? If you're working, you're still in a room kind of by yourself. Like I'm the other side of the planet and we're together, but I'm in a room by myself and my dog, right? And so that can be a very lonely thing, even though I'm talking to 300 people. So in the chat, we're going to go to Q&A here in a second, but in the chat, what are some of the things in this realm where you're feeling the challenge?
So we have a question, I think, from Sebastian Anthony. Sebastian says, how do we explain to young people who are misled by liberal thinking of toxic masculinity? And liberal thinking tends to link this with a patriarchal society, which truly complicates things and which is actually not true.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of times we kind of get bogged down in that. And we know that there have been expectations of men that have been negative, right? And we always want to grow and we always want to do that. But I live on a road named after my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather owned this farm but never lived here. My father moved here when he was 3 because my grandfather bought it. My father bought it from my grandfather. We moved here when my children were small, and I've tried to buy it, and I have a brother and a sister that want to be a part. I tried to kick them off and they wouldn't let me. But those men that went before me did some things then that we probably wouldn't think is great right now. Like my great-grandfather was a harsh man, right? I know he loved his children because I saw things in him. He lived to be 104. I was blessed to get to know him. But what he did then would not be accepted now. But what he did was raise 10 children at one time as a single father, right? And just the things that he did now that we think are somehow wrong or inappropriate, he would take a razor strop to his kids if they didn't get out of bed. And we think that's a horrible way to discipline children. If you've got 10 kids in a depression, and if they act like which they knew better to act like teenagers, I think. But if they act like teenagers, then we don't get cows milked, we don't get fields tended to, and we don't survive. And so many times, because like I said, when I promote strong fathers, when I promote men being in their role and doing their job, the conversation that always comes up is like, well, yeah, but what about single moms? What about women? I have a very strong wife. I have a very strong mom. I have a very strong sister. I have strong sister-in-laws. We're very proud of our daughter-in-law because she's a strong person. Just because I want to be a strong father doesn't take away from everybody else. Just because a man or a group of men think a certain way doesn't mean that all men think that way. And what we're doing is by men acting like men, we're trying to make them, this is the biggest challenge with fatherhood, is we're trying to make them act like moms. And all the social science has said that's not good for kids. That's not good for culture. That's not good for our society. Men should act like men in a positive manner and not be like women, because we need women to be women. We need men to be men. And there's a whole spectrum of that, right? I don't think it means men are harsh. I don't think men, a word we have here, macho. But it means that men are doing their job, and it's not wrong because they're doing it like a man. And I think that's where that liberal push. Ask about a place for man, which I was trying to explain. So when we talk about a place like, I had a job, and when I went to work, I liked it or I didn't like it based on where I was working or who I was working with. But my place then, and I really believe now, is as an educator in one way or another. My place is to be the cheerleader for people. My place, I'm not a soldier. I'm the last guy you want defending you. I'm way more of a guy that you would, want on your side as opposed to when I was younger. I've gained strength, I've gained courage, I've gained some things as an older man, but my place then was not to be one that went out and protected everybody. But my place has always been, I'm a teacher. That may determine where I work or how I work. But my place is, who am I and what gifts do I bring from my strength and my weaknesses? You know, your weaknesses are also a gift to people. So when we talk about place, I think is what you have to define for yourself. And that's not always a vocation. You may be doing something that nobody would think is encouraging. Like I'm a speaker, but I never want to be a motivational speaker. I'm not opposed to motivational speakers. My place is to teach, right? I believe people ought to be self-motivated. So I'm not a really great motivational speaker. I'm like, you ought to, here, I told you what to do, just go do it. But there are people that come into that. And so you're going to find outside of all these other realms, as a man, what is your place here? Are you the buddy? Are you the leader? Are you the support? Are you the contrarian, which is also a great place to be sometimes. It's not always fun, but you may be the devil's advocate and saying, this is not what I think we need to do. You may be the one that pushes ideas and people in a different way. So when we talk about place, that's kind of where we're going with that. So let's talk about being a worker. And that's one of those challenges because so much has changed on being a worker right now with this circuit breaker. So when we talk about being a worker, a lot of times when we as fathers think about work, we just think about making a living and supporting the family. And that's a huge part of it. That's a huge part of being a husband and a father, but it's also a huge part of why we get up and go to work. We've got to eat. We've got to survive. We need shelter. Those are reasons we go to work. But there's so much more that goes into our work, particularly that work which is fulfilling. I know people that are very wealthy and they're really good at making money, but they don't always have these other things. They don't feel worthy and they don't always have a purpose. I also know people that have a purpose, but they're always not sure how to make money. I'm one of those guys that I know my purpose, but I've got to figure out a way to make this work for my family because I want to continue to live in that purpose, but you've got to pay rent. And so you've got to kind of balance those things out. So as a worker, you want your worth. You want people to want to hire you. You want people to be happy that you showed up at work. And I know some of you right now, without that constant, I wouldn't say attention, that sounds negative, but without that constant contact, some of you have sat at home at work and wondered if anybody even knows you're there or if you're valid. Or if you're on a Zoom call with, well, we got 300 people. If you're on a Zoom call at work and there's 40 people and you don't get to give your input, sometimes we're challenged personally of like, am I worthy or not? And so we've got to understand part of the reason we get up every morning is because we feel good about what we're doing. If you have a job where you don't feel good about what you're doing, it doesn't matter how much they pay you. That becomes a really hollow experience. So we know that we want to have worth, right? We also want to know that even though other people are doing what we do, that I do things well, or I do things that other people can't do, that I have a place. And then it's also the why, right? It's what drives me to do this job. What drives me besides paying rent? And sometimes that's all that drives us. Sometimes I get up in the morning because I've got bills to pay. But it's so much of a better life when I've been in that place where I know my purpose and my direction. And so my why can drive me in that. But also my why can be a distraction. If I feel like the work I do at Strong Fathers is changing culture, is changing the lives of families, is helping people, which I believe, that can also get in the way of all the other things. It can get in the way of making money enough to pay rent. It can get in the way of my relationship with my children and my wife and those around me, because I can be so focused on that. So the why is a great thing, and sometimes it can be a real problem. And then we've all talked about how wealth does that if we focus too much on money, we lose our soul, we lose our family, we lose all these things. And some people, if you spend all your time looking at money, that will be what happens. Do you know what you're worth, right? Not just on a monetary value, but do you know that what you bring to the table benefits other people, right? And other people want you around. That's a great feeling. Also, do you know why you feel that worth? Like I can't be a banker. I can't stand paperwork. I'm the last guy you want to handle numbers on a spreadsheet, but I'm really good at what I do. And so I found my why. And people say, well, you can make this much money doing this. You can make this. I can't, because it doesn't drive me. And if I go in to do certain work, I don't have much worth. You notice I'm not a supermodel. There's a reason, because I don't have much worth as a supermodel. right? Unless they have an old man catalog, maybe. Maybe I can be an old man catalog model someday. But I know my worth. I know the ability that I have to work with people, to see things in a certain way. That helps pay my rent. That's helped me pay my rent. But also that why got me up every day to go out and get that rent, go out and get that money, and also to find my place of worth that was in balance with my family. So you guys, you said very nice things about me, Thomas. And I can walk out of my office in a minute and just say, man, I'm so important. I'm so good. Thomas said nice things about me. I got nice comments, and I'm going to walk out, and my wife's like, that's fine. Would you please pick up your laundry? I'm glad they loved you, but I need you to clean the dishes. And so my worth, is in balance with everything else. And we're going to spend a couple of seconds on that. Let me pull the Q&A back up. So let's see if we have any questions on that. Yeah, there's one here about teaching gender and sexual stereotypes, and man, that's a whole other session. But one of the ways that I've found, outside of all the things that we think we need to do, is that when men thrive as men in the role that they feel and that we see, people are attracted to that. When women do their job and fulfill their role in all the positive ways that a woman is a woman, a lady is a lady, a mom is a mom, people are drawn to that. And so that discussion is always void of good examples. So if we want to promote those things in our culture, we just have to continually step up and support it so people know, yes, this is a good thing. But the other thing is, people are drawn to what is true, right? So my job as a father is to show that by doing these things, my kids are reacting well. I've raised decent children. This is a way to do it, right? I've got one here from Roland. Living with an all-girl family, how do I show a positive masculinity to them, my children alike? Well, first off, you need all the support you can get if you're the only dude in the house. If you're the male in the house, that's a huge job. I always say I'm a strong father, but I'm not strong enough to have daughters. So we'll hit that when we talk about fatherhood. I think families mainly teach about values, moral and otherwise, than being a man or a woman. At least that's what I feel. And that's true, but and we say this about fathers, but it's about moms and dads. It's about men and women. Our job in teaching those values is from that perspective. Like right now, as I deal with my 24 and 28-year-old, as a father, I'm always referring back to how my father treated me, positively or negatively, when I was in that age range. And so what that does is it shows me good behavior or bad behavior. I've not done some of the things my father did. But the other piece of that is I go back to think, what drove my dad to act that way? Like, why did he restrain himself when it took restraint? Why did he come on with power? Why did he come on with strength? Why did he put me in my place as a young adult man? Well, it was because of the principles that drove him. And so that's what I've learned as well. And so I appreciate that question. And I have a question here about divorced fathers find the anchorage they need in society, fulfill their utmost duty as a father, and parental alienation and fatherlessness. And we'll talk about that as we get to the fatherhood piece, because that's always a big deal. So let's talk about being a husband for a minute. And I need to do this. My wife is probably in the other room listening, so I'm going to see if I get in trouble with this or not. But as a husband, we've got kind of three ways that we go about. And this sounds a little sweeter than you may think, because this is kind of all this flowery language, as we say. But lead, live, and love are those three things. The basis of that is love. And what can happen to a husband is if we do not get all those other three domains in balance, we begin to lose our love. We begin to be resentful. Like if I let my wife and my children take me out of my power, like they say, you ought to do this, and I want you to do this, and this is not how dads act, or this is not how husbands act, or whatever that may be, but I know it to be true. I mean, those challenges are fine. But if I know that to be true, then for me to stay in that truth, we have this phrase, my truth. And I think people have things that are true for them, but there is truth. And what my wife is looking for is leading and support, right? My wife wants me to lead our family. She wants me to take the helm. She wants me to be the one that steps out and makes decisions. Now she's going to tell me what decision to make sometimes, but she still wants me to make that decision so it's not resting on her shoulders. We as husbands have to take on that weight. You've got to get input if you want to survive your marriage, but you've got to take on that weight. So we've got to lead our kids. We've got to lead our wives. And that's not bossing, that's leading. That's pointing everybody in the direction. That's pointing your marriage in that direction. You know, so many times I would let my wife be in charge of date night, and it didn't work out like I wanted it to work out. Why? Well, because she wasn't being dated. She was having somebody go along with her to go out to eat or go to a movie or whatever. So me as a husband, I have to lead. Like I said, I have to show love to my wife. And sometimes that love is, no, our family standard is this. And if you're in contrast to that, we need to have this discussion. I can't just go with everything she says because it may not be positive for my family. I can't just let her do everything she wants to do as a wife and a mother if I see it's detrimental to my family. Now, it's not my decision to make as far as what I like or don't like, but it is my job, if I love my wife and I love my children, to make hard decisions and sometimes hard comments. But you also better back it up, right? And that's where that love comes in as well, is if they know what your heart is, when you bring hard conversations to your wife and to your kids, then it's going to be better taken. And again, it's so hard to talk about this because as soon as I say it, some of you have had negative relationships in your own marriage, or you saw it in your parents. So when I talk about lead, you feel like I'm trying to boss and berate. And that's not what leaders do. So we have that love, we have that lead, but the most important thing, like I kind of mentioned a while ago, was that live. My best example of my father is watching him live. He passed away about 7 years ago, but I still refer back to everything he did. We all remember things he said, right? And my dad had some really great sayings. He had some funny ones, but I always reflect on how did he live? And what that's helped me do as a father, like I said, of older children, and it helped me even when my kids were younger, was I knew they were watching. And my wife is watching as well, right? I influence my wife by the way that I live. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what I provide. It doesn't matter all these things if I'm not living within that same set of values. Like if I'm getting up and going to work every day to keep myself fed, if I'm getting up and going to work every day because it's just socially responsible, you know, the fun part about having hard times at work or working really hard around here on the farm, you know, you put the sweat in, you come in dirty, you come in sweaty. She sees that I'm doing that. And yes, I enjoy it, but she sees that I'm putting in the extra effort to do things for our family. And that's that live piece. And so as a husband, you've got to do all of those things. And so this is going to kind of wrap all that back around. I just had a question here. Is there a difference between being a father and a man? Personally, a man sounds very masculine, a man of total control in comparison to a father, where it seems a more non-masculine aspect. So when we talk about the father piece, I'm going to go back to what the question just was. So many times, because we think men have to be harsh and then fathers have to be soft, that's the whole reason I brought all these 4 pieces up, is because it seems to be in contrast with what we're talking about. Like we think fathers have a non-masculine aspect. And when we bring a non-masculine aspect to our kids, they don't respond well. Children at a very young age, like the day they're born, know the difference between mom and dad's voice. If dad's been around, they respond to dad's voice differently than mom's. By 2 weeks in, a dad can calm a child quicker than a mom can just with his voice. Mom does all these other amazing things that dads can't do. But if dad has been there during the pregnancy, when he speaks, his child calms down quicker than when mom does. And 2 reasons. Number 1, no matter what I'm upset about, mom's always going to be here. So I've kind of gotten used to mom's voice. The other thing is this other guy I'm not so sure about. What's he talking about? And so there's all kind of pieces that go into that. But that's why I wanted to bring these 4 pieces, is we have separated these things out, that if you're going to be a good worker, you ought to do these things. Well, now it's in contrast to my family, or it's in contrast to my purpose. Well, it can't be. This is a holistic view. Or I want to be a good husband. Yeah, but you've got work to do. You've got to pay rent. You've got to support the family. Or for you to get to the next level, there is some growth that has to happen in your job or in your work. Well, that takes away from my family. Yes and no. You've got to find that balance of, because I've worked from home for 20 years. My kids were in the house. So there was that real tug, and we're going to talk about that in a second. There was that real tug to leave the office. But if I leave the office, then we don't get to eat. We don't get to pay rent. We don't get to do things that we want to do. So it all comes down to a balance. And this has been the challenge of fatherhood should be less masculine, which is a lie. Because we put the negative on being a masculine person. And so the three things that we're going to talk about as a father is play, protect, and prepare. A lot of moms that are listening in would say dads don't really protect very well because we're always taking risk with our kids, or we're letting kids take risk through play. But one of the things we do as our family is not just get up in the middle of the night and lock all the doors and the windows. We don't just get up in the middle of the night to take on, we just don't stand between our family and the street, or stand between our family and maybe somebody trying to do harm. That's protection. But there's all these other things that we put in place to protect. We had somebody ask about their daughters, right? The best way you can protect your daughters is from the top. Prepare them to know what a good man should look like. Not a weak man, but a positive man. And what a strong man looks like, that a strong man can lead, a strong man can love, a strong man can do these things, right? And they're going to be attracted to that regardless, but they need to know what that looks like. And so the way we protect our kids is we prepare them for things that we can't do. I have no say about what my two sons are doing, where they move, where they work, what they do. I can influence it. But the hardest part for me as my kids have gotten older is to know that I have no control over that. It rests so much on what I did before to have that influence now. So one of the things you're doing as a father right now to protect your children really for the rest of their life is to build that trust, to show that honor, to show that courage, to live those things that we said as a husband does, and to live it. And now they know where to go back as the template and an example. Because there's going to be a time when they become teenagers and they begin to go out. They go to college and they go out. Then they're out of college and they're on their own, which is one of our goals, by the way. How do we protect them? Well, we protect them by all the preparing that we did before. And so our job is to prepare. I have a whole workshop on how moms and dads discipline differently. And mom disciplines for safety, and she disciplines for comfort in the home. Like you guys don't run around in the house because you're going to get hurt, or always fold the towels and put them up this way, because when you get the towels out, they smell fresh and you have a nice towel and, it doesn't smell funny. Dad has a discipline for the way kids are going to be outside the home because they represent the family name. They've got to be able to go to work, go to school, stay out of jail, find a spouse, not get in trouble, not be disliked. And so dad disciplines for how everybody else perceives their kid. Dad wants it safe in the house. Dad wants it quiet in the house. But most of dad's discipline is focused on how are you acting outside of this house. And that's a conflict between mom and dad, but it's a really good conflict if we're both fulfilling those roles and understand that we just don't see it the same way. And it's okay not to see it the same way. That goes back to that non-masculine fatherhood. Men should not be mothers. Men should not be trying to act like mothers. If you want to act like a more sensitive father, I am all about it. But if you're talking about wanting to do things in a more motherly way, your kids don't need that. Your kids have a mom. Those of you that are single parents have that challenge, but you can't be a mom and a dad at the same time. You have to pick what your role is and then find support for all those other things that you're not providing. It doesn't make you less. It just means you're doing all you can do in your role, but kids need both of those roles. So as a father, there's these three things that we do. Dads, a lot of you get in trouble for playing because mom will say, well, all you do is play. Well, that's what your kids ask of you to do. And so when we get those issues, these are things that we do to get kids ready to survive the next day and then survive outside of our home, right? And so we teach through play. We teach through rough and tumble play. That's a video that we're going to bring to you about how dads should do rough and tumble play with their sons and their daughters, because that's how you prepare a daughter as well, right? Your very first job for your daughters is to tell her she's beautiful. It's the most important thing she needs to hear. Your sons could care less about being beautiful. You need to tell your sons they're beautiful. You need to tell your sons that you think they're beautiful people. But that's not a boy's first question, but is absolutely a girl's first question. Now, you also need to teach a girl how to change the oil in the car, how to shoot the basketball, kick the soccer ball, or the football, sorry. And, we get a little bit football centric here in Texas, but that's how we prepare our kids. And so as we're talking about a father, where are you finding challenges in preparing this? So I've got a question here. How does a single dad be a strong father to his kids? I'm struggling as a single dad, and many times I feel I'm a dad and a mom. I can't turn back the clock. I can only look forward positively in God for me and my kids. I would tell you what I tell single moms and what I tell single dads. You need to do everything you can within your role to be the best you can in your parenting role. If you're the one that sets the discipline and parameters for kids, which is what dads typically do, then you've got to find somebody that they can run home to when they get hurt, when their heart is broken, right? And what we want to do is that single dads particularly feel this loss because they know they want to be what dads typically want to be, and they see the void that comes with not having a mom around. Our culture has told, the whole global culture has told us the kids just need a loving parent, so moms are good at it, just let them do it, which is not true. All the social sciences pointed to the fact that kids need both a mom and a dad, and particularly in their different roles. Now, moms and dads can change roles sometimes, right? We had a question about gay parents on here. Yes, they still have these two different roles to fulfill. The interesting part is almost every family where I've seen where they've had same-sex partners, one fulfills one role more than the other. And it's a very natural thing for them and their nature and their heart and or the way the kids have gravitated towards them. And so I think that always gives us that indication that kids need this balance. And what is typical is dads provide balance this way as moms provide this other balance. If you're a single mom or a single dad, know two things. You are enough in your role, but you are not enough for your kids to get everything they need. And that's not any reflection on you. Strong single moms that have raised great kids, as much as we want to give them all the credit, those great kids, the majority of those kids that have turned out well, have had somebody else in that role fulfilling maybe a father role. And it may be several men. It may be even different women. But somebody has said, you're going to behave a certain way out here. You're going to treat your mom a certain way. You're going to act a certain way. And that's different than when you run home to mom and get, because you stubbed your toe. And so we have to understand that kids need all these roles, and you can't provide all of them. And that doesn't take away from all your strength as a single mom or single dad. But so many times we're trying not to hurt your feelings. And it's not about your feelings. It's about what's good for a kid. And so understand, and that's the same thing as a father, right? You need that balance of a strong mom. Your kids need that balance. And it's another reason we wanted to bring up all these four things. As it said in the video, one of the most important things you can do as a father is to love their mom. The question always comes up, what if mom and I aren't together? That's fine, but you've still got to love and respect their mom. Well, she's not that easy to respect. It's not about you. It's not about what you guys have been through. It's about the fact that this now and forever will be the mother of your child. Single mom, same thing. Well, I don't like him. I don't want him around my kids. That is a father to those children. And he's got to grow into that role and have to have the opportunity to do that as well. And so many times we want to say, well, this ought to be enough. It's just not. The best parents on the planet, mom and dad, both doing their role, still need other mentors and people in place to help support those children. We use this thing, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes more than that, right? So one of the things that I love about working with FES is there's this overarching view of, yes, we as fathers need to do our job. Moms need to do their jobs. We need to have strong marriages because that makes it easier to do our job. It makes it easier for kids to have security. But we've all got to be in on this. I've got to do my job right here in Texas as an example to everybody else on the planet that it's possible, and that when you hopefully are a good father and husband, then you have kids that turn out to impact the world as well. And my dad, he had a saying that I've passed on to my kids, and my kids know it comes from me. They know it comes from their grandfather. Remember who you are, whose you are, and who you represent. And it's all those things. And so I have a responsibility to my family for my name, but I have a responsibility to all those around me to do that job. And so many times like I said, we don't want to hurt mom's feelings because we want her to think she's enough. It's not about her. She could be the greatest single mom ever, but her kids need more than that. And it's not her fault. It's just what kids need. And so let's talk a little bit now. And I want to see on the chat, we've got a little bit of time. Out of all these things that we've talked about, of trying to find this balance between being a man and a husband and a worker and a father, what are the challenges you're finding within the circuit breaker? What are the challenges about working at home while you're trying to be a husband, while you're trying to be a worker, while you're trying to be a father? And what is that doing to you as a man? So
I'm going to jump in with two questions in particular. Vernon, has mentioned that he hasn't always had best role models, and
right.
he feels somewhat inadequate as a dad. So how can he overcome that? And there's another question from Louis, which is kind of pertinent to what you just said, which is you've got to manage this tension between the role of worker and dad, because particularly today when so many jobs require so much investment of time and energy,
right.
How do you balance these two roles? What do you aim for to strike a balance? Even during the circuit breaker, when you're bringing work home, in a certain sense, you're working in a home environment, but you've got your kids calling out for you, but you're really split in a sense.
Well, let's talk about the role model real quick, because I think that I wouldn't say it's easy. That's the whole reason we do what we do at Strong Fathers, is because we have generations now of men that were not well fathered. And so I have a lot of guys in the field that I work with that come from that background of not having a father around. And when I first started working in the field of fatherhood and father engagement, I was really conflicted because everybody I was working with didn't have a father at home. And so that's what drove them to this work. They wanted to see it better, and they wanted to help other men. Well, I knew my dad, my granddad, and my great-granddad. And I had, and as much as they were faulty people and human, I just had that support that many men didn't have. And I thought, why am I in this work? And then I realized I'm called to this work because there is a way to do it. I'm called to this work because as much as I was raised by human men, they were good human men, right? And they did those things that needed to be done. And so what I am finding, and if you mentioned my TED Talk, that TED Talk was in response to the fact that everybody's talking about what happens when fathers aren't around. That's a real problem, but nobody's talking about the solution. And the solution to having no fathers around is to have fathers around. And so what I would also tell you as a father who's struggling to say, number one, go with your heart. Go with your gut, as we say, because you know what you wanted as a child. Provide that for your kids. Because you didn't just want to go to the theme park and you just didn't want lots of gifts. You wanted somebody that showed up every day and was there and gave you that security, right? When we talk about the things I talked about those 4 areas of a man and a father and a husband, the people that respond most to that are those that didn't see that in their own lives as a child. Now, sometimes they want to put worth to it on themselves. It doesn't change your worth, but you feel unworthy because you feel like somebody chose not to be there. That's not always the case. But what you can choose now as a father is, number one, what is your gut telling you? Because everybody in the culture is telling you you're wrong because you're not acting like they want you to act. But your heart knows. Now, you still need to gain some skills and knowledge, but you in your gut know as a father what you want to provide for your kids. And my first instinct is to tell you to follow your instinct and know that you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. But you're making mistakes in the presence of your children, as opposed to running away and not making mistakes. The other thing is, the reason we do what we do at Strong Fathers, the reason I love support with FES is find support groups. There's great groups right there in Singapore that are supporting other fathers, and they can give you lessons and knowledge and curriculum. I've written curriculum. They've got curriculum. But what you learn more than anything, like the value that I have brought to men in this country, is some really good ideas, but most of it is that I've gotten men all in the same room and we learn from the guys not doing a good job. We're like, man, I never want to be like that dude. And we also learn from guys that are doing a great job. And what we're learning is he's doing that and his children are reacting this way. That's the way I want my children to react. What do I do? Like, part of my role now as an older father is when people see how my young sons turned out, they want to know, what did you do? And I said, well, first off, I survived. Secondly, I would now tell you with wisdom that I worried about things maybe I shouldn't have worried about. And I didn't worry about some things I should have worried about. But I'm going to tell you, for a father that didn't have a good role model, there's role models everywhere around you, older and even your age, that are doing a great job, be in the company of other good men. And that's what you can do through FES. That's what you can do through other groups. Find those mentors, but more than anything, all men can be mentors because we learn from each other. I learned from guys that were making mistakes, and I thought I never want to make that mistake because I could see it. So be in the company of men, hopefully good men, hopefully good fathers, but they don't have to be old dudes like me that, now have a 24 and a 28-year-old. Hopefully we can be of service to you, but be around men that are raising kids because they're going to have the same challenges. So let's talk about those challenges. At the end of the day, for us to survive, we have to make money. But why do you need to make money? Why do you need to do the work? That's why we went with worker when we talked about purpose in place. When we talked about manhood, purpose in place. You as a man have to fulfill your purpose, but as a worker, you've got to do things that bring worth to your family, that support your family. So at the end of the day, when work overcomes us, we have to think, why am I working? I'm working to support my family. Well, what if I work so hard I lose my family? I have very vivid memories etched in my brain of my wife standing with a child on her hip and the other hand on her hip and saying to me about work, if this doesn't change, I can't be here. Well, guess what? I had to start making different decisions about what my work was worth. And so I tried to make changes. And when those changes didn't affect my family the way I wanted to, I made very drastic changes, which I do not regret at all. Because you know what? I've been married 31 years. I have 2 strong sons. Now, when I did that, I quit being a middle school principal, right? And that was my goal. That was my path. That I was going to move up in education. I was going to be a rock star principal or a superintendent. Or that was my mindset. But I was going to lose my family. The other part is people said, well, it's so heroic. You changed your career path for your family. I quit being a middle school principal. That's like saying I stopped hitting myself in the head with a hammer. And I loved my job. But when I found out that my family was way worth more than that, I found another way to pay rent. And I don't want everybody to go out right now and quit your job because there's a lot of ways to find balance. But think about what's worth it. There are times when our family wants something that we go in and we brave it up. And we go in and we talk to the boss about a raise, or we move on to a higher position and we do the work to get there because it brings more things to our family. You need to be just as brave to go into work and say, hey, I need to do this. So let's talk about circuit breaker for a minute. You've got to work. Many of you leave home and go to work, and there's this really good line that when you leave the house, you're at work. When you come in the house, hopefully you're no longer at work. We could all talk all day about the challenges of walking in the house and still having work in our hands. That's its own session. But now your work is in the house. So here's some real quick tips on that. Set the delineation of your time, and when you're at work, do everything you can do to be at work. And tell your kids, I know you want to play. I know you want to go to the park. I know you need me to read to you. That's fine. I'm going to do it here. But now we have to have tough discussions with our families, which we seem to be really good at doing. We've also got to have tough decisions with our workplace. It's like, look, I'm at work 24 hours a day now. And so I'm going to set this time apart. And it may be an 8-hour day. It may be a 10-hour day. And like, I'm at work here, but as soon as I'm not at work, I'm not at work. A lot of you have the opportunity and flexibility to say, you know what, I'm going to get up earlier. That's a hard thing for us dads to do, but it's so valuable. I'm going to get up and do this work. And then I'm going to put in 3 hours. I'm going to put in 4 hours. I'm going to put in 5 hours. And then I'm going to have this break. And that's when we're going to the park. That's when my lunch break is with my children, or my lunch break is with my wife, or I'm going to set those priorities. And we've got to have that tough discussion about how we're going to delineate that. And if your bosses want you to be productive, they have to understand this is a valid discussion to have. Now, maybe the next thing we need to do together is talk to those that are running staff, because this is a challenge for moms and dads both. How do I find this balance? Well, we've got to have some flexibility. If you want it to be a 9 to 5, a show up at 9 and work till 5, that's fine, but that's really hard to do in an office where there's children running around. But if I can be really productive in the morning before children get up, or I can be really productive at night after the children go to bed, if I'm getting my work done in a timely manner, what difference does it make what the clock says? Same thing with your children. So we here in Texas are locked down. None of the kids are in school. And so my brother, who is a teacher, my sister-in-law, who is a secretary for a church, so she has a lot of flexibility, they don't get up at their house until like 10 o'clock because they have teenagers that are always going to sleep till 10 o'clock. So they sleep in, they get up, and it just drives me crazy because now that I'm old, I'm up early all the time. I'm that guy. But they get kids busy on their schoolwork throughout the afternoon. And then their family time is really spent, you know, in the time change now. Now there's family time is like 8 to midnight, right? We'd never keep our kids up during the school year till midnight, but things have changed. And so we're just got to rearrange our schedule. I've got one here. So I lost my job during this period, and I find that I've lost my worth. And that, Mitchell, that's exactly what we were talking about. What you have to understand is this is not permanent. It feels permanent. And what you have to understand, your worth is not in your job. Your worth is not even in the fact that you're making money. Your value is there sometimes, but it's not your worth. Your worth is the fact that in this time, while you're not working, you're looking for work, you're finding ways to make a better future for your family. And sometimes you just got to stop right now and do what you can do. My father was a teacher and a coach. My mom always made more money than he did as a teacher and a coach. But my father always led our family. And if my mom wanted to stay home, she had that right and availability. My dad never had that right. My dad knew that no matter what he was doing, he was going to get up. And so your worth is in leading your family. You're going to find a way by leading your family, Mitchell, that whether I'm saving money, whether I'm finding services for my family in this time of need, or whether I'm doing something now that's going to have a big impact on my family later because I have this time, then that's what you're going to do. Your worth is in your leadership. Your worth is in being a man. People need you, your family and people around you need you to be leading in what you're doing. That's what we talked about in power. You're not less of a man because you don't have a job right now. You don't have a job because people quit spending money. You don't have a job because people had fear when they should have or shouldn't have. It doesn't change who you are as a man, but it feels that way. Your worth is in leading your family and seeing the bigger picture than this right now. Right now, we got to keep people fed, got to keep them sheltered. That's our first step, but that's where you lead. And so understand too, that even as a father, right? And I've seen men do this. Well, I'm no longer working, so I'm going to pour all my stuff into being around the kids and being a lot of fun because everything else is not that fun. It's another reason we brought up the 4 roles. You still have responsibility as a father to do everything you can do to support them. It's much different than it was in the past. But you still have to be the worker. You may need to build a business at this time. You may need to build skills so you have a better job. You may just need to get out there and have the guts, and it's hard, believe me, to have the guts to face up people and say, I need work. And if you have work, I want to be the guy that fulfills that. And so, and that's a hard discussion to have. So as we begin to wrap up, I know that I'm talking so much, but I love your questions. So I'm going to end with this one. While it's important to create awareness of the importance of fatherhood amongst fathers, won't it be important as well to educate the fairer gender the same, especially when there is extreme feminism presently, where the support for women is everywhere, but not for men? At our house, when those commercials come on where every man in a commercial looks like an idiot, my wife rolls her eyes before I say anything because she knows I'm about to go on a rant, because it's like, why are men on TV always idiots, right? And we would never portray a woman like that. And I think that's appropriate, but why do we have to portray fathers like that and men as like that? Now, we as men can have some fun about what we do as dads, but here's the best way. 2 things. Number 1, I put out research, and I don't do the research, but I find it and I promote it all the time. That's what we're going to be doing with FES about the true value of fathers. It's empirical data, right? We can all have this great feeling and kumbaya and fuzzy, aren't dads great? But we've got to put data to it. What does it mean for children and society when men step up into the role as fathers, husbands, workers, and men, right? And so we've got to do that. And the best way for people to see value in us as fathers is a very long-term game. We just got to keep showing up and doing it. and make it undeniable that we are having an impact in our neighborhood, we're having an impact in our marriage, we're having an impact in our children's lives, and we're having an impact in the places where we work or will work because of who we are, and we have to make that undeniable. And so we've got to live in our strength, we've got to live in our power, and we have to continue to have this discussion. And so I appreciate your time. Thomas, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thomas, if anybody has any questions after, we want to honor everybody's time. I'm going to stay around a few minutes, but I'll let you tell them how we're going to do that.
For those of you who want to learn more, to really embrace good fatherhood, Mike, what's the best way to follow you on social media so we can continue to benefit from your ministry?
strongfathers.org/FES. And there's a quick form on there. And if you fill out the form, we're going to send you calendars of activities to do with your kids. Let's get something very clear. You are not my customers. You are my friends and colleagues, and we're working with FES. So we're never going to try to sell you anything. We just want to provide resources. So we've got things that we'll provide in May. Lots of great things to do, particularly with your younger kids and then your older kids. Also, I know you guys are switching things up, and school starts back in June. We're going to give you what we call 100 things to do with your kids in the summer, whatever that, who knows what summer is right now, right? But it's 100 things to do with your kids when they're home, whether that's during school or out of school. And so that, again, that's strongfathers.org/FES, no capitals. Our website is strongfathers.org. There's a contact page there if you have specific questions. You can email me directly at mike@strongfathers.com, which is our business side. And then we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and everything is @strongfathers. And so we'd love to have you join us on Facebook. And this may be another place we can continue this discussion. I monitor that all the time. Let me know that you were in on this Zoom call. And let me know if you have a specific question, and we can have a thread going there as well. And then I'll let you tell them about all the ways they can connect with FES.
Yeah, that's awesome. So so if you'd like to also learn more about FES, which is, the people who are organizing this talk tonight, or to get updates on new conferences and new talks, please visit fes.org.sg, or follow us on Facebook. Just type in Family Enrichment Society. And if you'd like to support the work we do, please consider making a donation or a love offering as well, which you can also do on the website. So that's the information on how you can support FES through the various avenues for donations and love offerings. And we'll try to post this on the Facebook page as well, so you can reference that. Or you can, if you like to take a screenshot, we'll leave it up there for a little while. There's a very interesting question from Ricky, talking about how, while it's important to create awareness for the importance of fatherhood, how do we actually try to get, our spouses, the fairer sex, involved in understanding as well, the roles of fathers as being really impactful in the family? Because there's obviously some observations that in certain places there is an extreme feminism present, right, where the idea that whatever a man can do, a woman can do as well, even better. So how do we help our whether it's our wives, our friends, our colleagues, understand a little bit more about the complementary relationship between men and women?
Right. So when I started doing this 20 years ago, let me tell you, fatherhood and the idea of fatherhood was not very popular. And so we talk about the challenges now. It was even worse, I think, before. But one of the things that has helped us in our work is that we're focused on what dads do for kids, right? When we talk about our adult situations and how people get along, so many times we're like, yeah, but moms can do that. And that's not what kids tell us. And that's another reason we brought up those 4 things. My job as a husband kind of always stays the same. And then my fatherhood bleeds into that. And we were very adamant, and my wife really led the charge on this. We had friends and family members that when the kids left their home, because mom and dad or mom as much, if not dad more, were so focused on the kids that when the kids were gone, the marriage fell apart. So we always made a real point to make sure that we knew that the kids were going to leave, right? And then we'd be stuck with each other, which we are. You talk about circuit breaker. We're both in the house together right now. But we have to understand what has helped us is focusing, number one, on what the research says, and it's very clear about what the role of fathers is and how fathers do things differently and how those different things are beneficial to kids. And then the other part is that's the point of fatherhood, right? In our marriages and in relationships, it comes into play, but our role as a father is supported and is focused on raising children. And we don't give birth, we don't breastfeed. We're very happy about both of those. And women can do lots of great things, but they can't do it as like a man, not because he's better, but because he's different. And nobody is talking about this difference because we feel like if we bring up a difference, it changes the value of somebody else. And that's not true. The truth is people, and particularly children, see our value for what we bring to them. I talk about how when dad shows up from work, even our guys that really, like we had somebody that asked about, I didn't have good role models. Even guys that are struggling to know how to father or maybe haven't been very connected to their kids, what their kids want them to do with them is play. Whereas when mom comes in the door and the kids jump on her the first time, she's not happy about it. She's telling them to get down. And because mom has too many rules, she ends up not being that fun to play with. Nothing wrong with mom, doesn't change who she is. Kids want to play with dad. He's typically physically bigger. He typically is rougher with them, both boys and girls, and that's what kids are seeking. What's hard as a father sometimes is when a child falls down, skins their knee, cuts their finger, and they run right past you as a dad and they go to mom, because mom is the one that's going to pick them up. She's going to put on a Band-Aid. She's going to give them a treat. She's going to give them a kiss, and everybody's better. Well, it feels like it when I was a younger father. Doesn't mean that I don't have worth. It means my kids see her as the one they run to. If I'm the only one around, or when I was the only one around, and my kids fell, what they learned to do was look at me, and if it was bad, I would pick them up and kiss their sores just like anybody else would, and find them a treat and give them a hug. But a lot of times as a father, they'd look at me and like, he's not going to do much about it. I might as well get up and be tough. And I didn't say get up and be tough. They just knew that's what my role was. And even children as young as 2 and 3 weeks old will incorporate more play with fathers, not the dads, but more role. The kids will do this at such a young age. So one of the studies that I show is Michael Yogman out of Yale did a study where he put a baby in a chair, like a child safety seat, and put a screen in front of them. And when the mother showed up, their heart rate went down, their brain activity decreased, their hands and feet stopped moving, their shoulders drooped. Because here comes mom, she provides comfort, and this is a very young child. She provides comfort. I know what she's going to do. She's going to be consistent, and so everything changes. Same kid, when the dad is shown on the screen, the kid's heart rate goes up, brain activity increases, hands and feet start moving, and they want to move. This is a kid that's less than 6 months old. And he's already learned the difference between the male and the female and what he's getting from them or what she's getting from them. What was interesting was they put emotionless mothers and fathers on the screen. And when the mother was emotionless on the screen, the child would try to get her attention. Because he couldn't get her attention, he would then begin to pout and then cry out and then cry. Same child, when the father was emotionless on there, they would try to make motion, try to make noise. There was very little pouting, if any, and all they were trying to do was engage the dad. And so I use that information in research and now our own practical experience of knowing kids are telling us what they need. Right? We've got to stop listening to all this. And I say pseudoscience in the fact that people make things up to meet what they want to meet. I'm very adamant about making sure the research says what it says and nothing more. Like there's things I'd like to promote about fatherhood that the research doesn't show is true. We always talk about single parents and they're like, they have great kids that turn out. Absolutely. But if you look at the research, kids that have like only one parent that they can engage with. If they have all these positive aspects as adults, there was somebody else in their life or a team of people playing that role. That's for single fathers, single mothers, both. Right? And the research shows, though, that most kids with single parents, mothers or fathers, have an array of challenges with their behavior, with their impulse control, with their risky behavior, with their relationships, both sexually and intimately in other ways. And that's not the culture changing that. That's the culture suffering from that. And so I think our job as men is, number one, step up and just continue to fill that role that I know your heart feels. I find that when most men are able to clear their minds, they know what they want to do. You got so many messages coming in. So we want to kind of clarify those messages and encourage you in that. And so, and that's where we're going to be headed. So we also want to know, what else can we help with? Like, this was an hour. This was an old man from Texas rambling about all the things I think and know. And, but we want to help you guys any way we can, both moms and dads. And I see some of the quotes that I can't touch or talk about, but I think a lot of us would be along those same lines of, and whatever ism it is, right? Any ism. Is it good for our families? Is it good for our kids? When we talk about why and purpose, I am not doing fatherhood work for hairy-legged men, right? I'm doing this for the sake of children and what men do for those children. If I was I am in men's ministry, but it's really hard for me to be motivated full-time to minister to men, particularly grown men. And I understand the pain and where they've come from, but most of the challenges we have as men came from what happened to us as children. And that's the same for moms and dads. That's the same for men and women. So what my purpose is to guide men, that's my specific purpose, to do things that benefit children. And so everything we talk about, it's not about whether mamas are right, dads are right, men are stronger, women are stronger. None of that matters. What are we supposed to be doing for kids? And men are supposed to step into this role in a certain way because the research and practical experience has shown us that.
That's great, Mike. I'm just going to quickly answer a couple of questions that's on the chat box. One is, don't forget to fill up the poll that we had. That's going to give us some idea about what we can improve on as well and what you like. A couple more questions. Someone was asking as well that, it's easy to be a dad when you're working. You've got a certain number of hours, essentially,
right.
with the kids.
Yeah.
So you come back. I mean, you've done your job. You've brought home the bacon, and now you can play with the kids. But this whole new pandemic is really throwing everything out of the loop, and so this is a new situation for everyone. What do we say to dads who suddenly realize that this aspect of being available to their children for a lot more hours than they're comfortable with is something they need to look into, because they're actually backing off and feeling like, hey, I'm just not doing so well. I thought I was a great dad, but I just can't stand proximity,
Well, and that's what I thought we'd end up talking more about. And so I think one of the challenges is exactly that. So I was a teacher and a middle school principal. And when my oldest child was born, my wife and I were both teachers. And so we both went back to work. I would pick him up from the babysitter, take him to the babysitter. I would take him to my classroom. I would spend weekends with just he and I while mom went and did things, and was able to really co-parent. And that's what I wanted to do. And I just had that really experience, and which provided confidence and all that. When we had our second child on the way, my wife wanted to stay home. And so that's when I changed my career path to become a principal, because it provided a better living for us. And over time, even though I was home every night, I wasn't home. I was out of my mind. I was a zombie. And there was a time, this was what not made the difference, but it was one of those markers where I go to tie my youngest kid's shoes, and he goes, "Dads can't tie shoes." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And that was one of those markers of like, wait, something's different here. And so because of the challenges it provided to my marriage, because of the challenges, and the challenge in our marriage was as much of how I was fathering or not fathering. Right? That's why we talked about all those roles. So when my wife said something's got to change, and I knew in my heart it needed to change, I just didn't know what. Right? And so when I talk about my wife standing there and kind of challenging me, that was a great thing for me, because I knew the challenges. I just didn't know where to go with it. She made it pretty clear where I needed to go with it. But so I go from that to teaching, and I do a year of teaching where she and I are now balancing kids again together. And that was definitely different. And then I started doing fatherhood work from home. I was a virtual worker 20 years ago with dial-up internet and a Nokia phone. And I had a 4-year-old at home with me. And so when I talk about finding that balance, believe me, I understand. And it was a constant battle all the time. So even when both my kids went to school, well, now they're at school, they've got a school party, they need to be picked up, they need to do whatever. So my wife and I were always negotiating, how do I get my job done? I had flexibility, so I could take them to work, I could take them to school, I could pick them up from school, but there were times when I had to do my job. And so I think that goes back to, it becomes a discipline issue, which doesn't happen overnight. It becomes an awareness issue of, like you said, wow, I'm a great dad 2 hours a day. This is hard 24 hours a day. These kids are driving me crazy. And I've had several discussions with fathers that are new to this situation. And let me encourage you. Let me encourage you to say that if your children are driving you nuts, that's okay. How you react to it may or may not be okay, but there's nothing wrong with feeling this frustration. There's nothing wrong with having this be a challenge. Nobody's supposed to do this well any given day. We have moms that have historically stayed home with kids. And if you were to sit down with a stay-at-home mom, they would tell you these same things. They don't want to say their kids drive them crazy, but this is not an easy job. So now you're trying to balance work. They don't mind calling you at home anytime because you're supposed to be at work now 24 hours a day. And now your kids are like, you're home all the time, so you must be a dad 24 hours a day. And then your wife is like, hey, I got a job and I've got kids. Now you got to be a husband 24 hours a day. And there's only so many hours in a day, and they've got to be split around that. So first off, give yourself some grace and know that this is all learning. The other thing is, as you're learning and making mistakes, whatever those are, and I don't know that you and I would even agree what you're doing is a mistake sometimes. But as you make those mistakes, number one, that's how you learn. Number two, your kids will be fine. You're not going to scar them for life. I mean, you will, but you're going to do that regardless. That's another discussion. But you're not going to scar them for life because you don't do something right tomorrow. You're not going to scar them for life because you lose your patience and you get angry that one time. You can't go around the whole day, the whole week, your whole life, and just be in a rage all the time because this is hard. But having that frustration and having that want to explode is a real deal. So that's where you have to bring strength back to this of, I've got to work when I work. I've got to father when I father. Sometimes you can do both at the same time. We talk about virtual work, and we have this famous video now of the guy that's supposed to be a CNN contributor and his kids coming in the room. This morning, I knew we were going to have 300 to 400 people coming in. I don't have any kids at home. I have a dog that's actually more of a pain than my children. But my internet went out, and I was about to lose my mind. But I can only do so much about that. What I hated about that CNN situation is, and he's not a fatherhood guy, he's a finance guy. But as a fatherhood guy, I always kind of embraced my kid because it improved my image, right? When my kids would get in on the phone call, I'm like, you just got to include this. And yeah, you just got to use it for what it is. People that you work with need to know that there's a reason you're working. And so there's nothing wrong with saying, hang on a minute, I've got a child in here, hang on a minute, I need to do something. Or can we postpone our meeting till 4 because I've got to take care of my kid, or my kid's going to be down for a nap so I can be more productive at this time. And that's a new negotiation. And the other thing you have to understand, except for a few people you're working with, everybody understands that. But I think the most encouragement I can give you is, number one, it is new, it is frustrating, and it's okay to be frustrated. And at the same time, it gives you a really new opportunity to be creative, which is not always fun. But also now, like you said, you're kind of finding out, wait, I thought I was a good dad. Well, you are a good dad. You're going to work. You are a good dad. You're playing with your kids. Just because you're not playing with your kids 10 hours a day doesn't mean you're not a good dad. You've got to do both of those. And what makes you a good dad is finding that balance, and that balance comes over time.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a great hour and a half, actually.
Yeah, no, here we go, dude.
And I think, we could stay on for another hour and the people will still be wanting something, but we've got to wrap up. So the folks here can get a good night's rest as well. I just want to.
Hey, y'all go to bed. I got work to do.
Yeah, but I can tell from the cows behind you.
Yeah, this is my office. They're all in my office, right? So.
And do please tell everyone about this so that as many people as possible, we want them to come on, because this whole enterprise of trying to build families, of trying to be better parents and trying to be better dads as well, is such a crucial thing that's lacking in our society today. So we really need to really pull everyone together and make a great deal of effort in this. So Mike, once again, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. And we'll see you soon. We'll catch you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Thomas.